I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of my phone buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. Through the fog of fever and exhaustion, I reached for it, my hand trembling as I unlocked the screen. What I saw made my blood run cold despite the fever burning through my body. $9,194. Gone. Drained from the Evelyn Vance Trust Fund account in less than 2 hours. Transaction after transaction, each one a knife to my gut. Solo luxury sneakers, $2,450. iPhone 15 Pro Max, $1899. Designer watches, premium electronics, luxury brand clothing, all purchased within a 90-minute window while I lay sick in bed, too weak to even check my phone. I knew immediately who had done this. There was only one other person with access to that card, and he had just destroyed his entire future with his greed. Before we go any further, if you are enjoying this story of justice being served, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up to toxic family members. Your support means everything, and I read every single comment you leave. Now let me take you back to where this all began, because you need to understand how we got to this moment of reckoning. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 29 years, I had been the invisible daughter, the responsible one, the one who held everything together while my family took and took and took. I am a historian, someone who spends her days preserving the past, cataloging the stories of people long gone, finding meaning in documents that most people would consider dusty and irrelevant. My colleagues at the university archives often told me I had a gift for seeing patterns in history, for understanding the motivations behind human actions across centuries. What they did not know was that I had spent my entire life studying the patterns of my own family, trying to make sense of the inequality, the favoritism, the casual cruelty that had defined my childhood and followed me into adulthood. My grandmother Evelyn Vance had been a force of nature. She built a real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single rental property in the 1970s and expanding it into a portfolio worth millions. She was sharp calculating, and she saw people for exactly what they were. I spent countless afternoons with her as a child, sitting in her office while she reviewed contracts, negotiated deals, and built the foundation of our family's wealth. She taught me about compound interest, about the importance of delayed gratification, about protecting what you build. She also taught me about human nature, about how money reveals character rather than creating it. When I turned 18, Grandma Evelyn sat me down in that same office and told me something I would never forget. "Eleanor," she said, her pale blue eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. "You have something your mother and brother do not have. You have integrity. You understand that wealth is not just money, it is responsibility. It is the obligation to preserve what has been built for future generations, not to squander it on momentary pleasures." She created the Evelyn Vance Trust Fund 3 years before she died, placing $250,000 in it with strict instructions. The money was designated for my younger brother Brandon's future to be accessed only for legitimate expenses like education, starting a business, or purchasing a first home. I was named the trustee, the gatekeeper, the one person Grandma Evelyn trusted to follow the rules she had laid out. Brandon would receive full access to the principal when he turned 30, assuming he had demonstrated financial responsibility before that age. But there was another clause, one that Grandma Evelyn had insisted on including, despite the lawyer's suggestions that it might be too harsh: the forfeiture clause. Any fraudulent, unauthorized, or frivolous withdrawal made by the beneficiary Brandon before the age of 30 would immediately and irrevocably forfeit that person's right to inherit the trust principal. It was a test, a final lesson from a woman who understood that easy money corrupts character. My mother, Victoria Vance, had always been beautiful, charming, and utterly self-serving. At 50 years old, she had maintained her real estate career through a combination of genuine skill and ruthless networking. She knew how to read people, how to tell them exactly what they wanted to hear, how to close a deal by making clients feel like they were getting something special. What she brought to her professional life, she also brought to her personal relationships. Everything was transactional. Everything was about what she could gain. Brandon, my younger brother, had been born when I was 8 years old, and from the moment he arrived, the dynamics of our family shifted irrevocably. He was a beautiful baby, all golden curls and bright eyes, and my mother treated him like he had been sprinkled with stardust. He could do no wrong. When he threw tantrums, it was because he was passionate. When he failed classes, it was because the teachers did not understand his learning style. When he crashed the car at 16, it was because the roads were poorly maintained. There was always an excuse, always a justification, always someone else to blame. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one, the boring one, the one who did not need attention or praise or support because I could handle things myself. I paid my own way through college with scholarships and part-time jobs while Brandon got a brand new car for his 16th birthday. I moved into a modest apartment after graduation while Brandon lived rent-free in Mom's spacious home. I built my career slowly and carefully while Brandon drifted from one get-rich-quick scheme to another, always convinced that his big break was just around the corner. For years, I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that I was independent, that I did not need my mother's approval, that Brandon's failures were his own problem. But the truth was that it did hurt. It hurt every time Mom forgot my birthday, but threw Brandon an elaborate party. It hurt every time she asked me for money to bail Brandon out of yet another financial mess. It hurt every time she looked at me with barely concealed disappointment, as if my stability and success were somehow less valuable than Brandon's potential. The requests started small after Grandma Evelyn died. Mom would call her voice warm and maternal in a way it rarely was otherwise, asking if I could help Brandon with rent, with a car payment, with some urgent expense that he could not cover. I helped at first, using my own money. I thought that maybe if I supported him, he would find his footing. I thought that maybe if I was generous, Mom would finally see that I was a good daughter, a good sister. But then the requests escalated. 6 months after I became trustee of the Evelyn Vance Trust, Mom started suggesting that Brandon could use some of that money. Just for living expenses, she said, just to get him started. He is family after all. The trust is meant to help him. I explained patiently at first that the trust had very specific rules. Brandon could apply for disbursements for education, for business startup costs, for a home down payment. He could not just withdraw cash for general living expenses or luxury purchases. Grandma Evelyn had been very clear about this. She had seen too many young people destroy their lives with easy money. Mom's warmth evaporated. She became cold, accusatory. I was being selfish, she said. I was on a power trip, she said. I was jealous of Brandon, she said. Did I want him to fail? Did I enjoy watching him struggle? What kind of sister hoards money while her brother needs help? The worst part was that a small, wounded part of me wondered if she was right. Maybe I was being too rigid. Maybe I was holding on to the rules because it was the only power I had in a family where I had always been second best. Maybe I should just give Brandon what he wanted and stop being such a controlling, uptight, boring person. But I held firm because I had made a promise to my grandmother, and because somewhere deep down I knew that giving Brandon access to that money would not help him. It would only enable his worst instincts. For 2 years, the requests continued. Mom would text me always late at night, always with some new emergency. Brandon needs help with medical bills. Brandon needs help with car repairs. Brandon needs help with security deposits. And every time I would ask for documentation, for receipts, for proof that this was a legitimate expense covered by the trust terms. And every time the proof would never materialize and Mom would accuse me of being heartless. Brandon himself rarely contacted me directly. When he did, it was always casual, always coated in sibling affection that felt performative. Hey sis, just checking in. Hey sis, been a while since we hung out. Hey sis, I know you are busy, but I could really use some advice about this investment opportunity. It was never quite a direct request, but the subtext was always clear. He wanted access to the trust, and he thought if he buttered me up enough I would crack. I did not crack, but I also did not cut them off. I kept answering the calls, kept explaining the rules, kept hoping that eventually they would understand. I kept telling myself that this was what family did, that you did not give up on people just because they were difficult. Then came that night, the night I woke up to $9,000 in fraudulent charges. I sat in my bed, fever making my thoughts fuzzy, but my anger crystalline and sharp. I scrolled through the transactions one by one, my stomach churning with each luxury purchase. Brandon had not just used the trust debit card without permission. He had gone on a shopping spree, treating my grandmother's carefully saved money like his personal piggy bank. My hands shook as I dialed Harrison Thorne, the attorney who had handled Grandma Evelyn's estate and who served as the trust's legal advisor. It was 3:15 in the morning, but Harrison was a light sleeper and a man who understood that some calls could not wait until business hours. He answered on the third ring, his voice gravelly with sleep, but sharpening quickly as I explained the situation. "Eleanor," he said after a long pause, "you know what this means. Your grandmother was very specific about the consequences." "I know," I said, and my voice did not shake even though my entire body was trembling. "I know exactly what this means. We will need to document everything Harrison said, his tone shifting into professional mode. Every transaction, every communication you have had with Brandon or Victoria about the trust. This is going to get ugly." "It already is ugly," I replied. "But Grandma Evelyn prepared me for this. She told me I needed to be the gatekeeper no matter what." After I hung up with Harrison, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my fever making the room spin slightly. Part of me wanted to ignore what had happened to pretend I had not seen those transactions to avoid the nuclear fallout that was about to engulf my family. But a larger part of me, the part that had been quietly building strength for 29 years, knew that this was the moment my grandmother had anticipated. This was the test. I finally fell back asleep around 5 in the morning, and when I woke at noon, my fever had broken, but my resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. That is when the doorbell started ringing, insistent and demanding. I pulled on a robe and stumbled to the door, already knowing who I would find on the other side. Brandon stood there dressed in brand new designer clothes, sneakers that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a watch that gleamed expensively in the afternoon light. He had a shopping bag from a luxury boutique in one hand and his new iPhone in the other. He was grinning that careless, confident smile that had always gotten him out of trouble with Mom. "Hey, sis," he said, leaning against the doorframe like he owned the place. "My crypto buddy just had a huge win and I am riding high. Thought I would come share the good news." It took every ounce of self-control not to slam the door in his face. Instead, I crossed my arms and blocked the entrance. "Where is my card, Brandon?" His smile faltered just slightly. "What card?" "The trust debit card. The one you stole from my wallet while I was sick yesterday." His expression shifted, cycling through surprise, defensiveness, and finally settling on indignation. "I did not steal anything. I borrowed it. There is a difference. You took it without permission and spent $9,000 on luxury items. That is not borrowing, that is theft." Brandon rolled his eyes, actually rolled his eyes like I was being ridiculous. "Oh my God. Eleanor, do you hear yourself? You sound like a lawyer. It is family money. It is meant for me anyway. I just got it a little early." "That is not how trust funds work, and you know it." He pushed past me into my apartment, making himself comfortable on my couch like he had every right to be there. "Look, I will pay it back. Okay, Jesus. You do not have to be so dramatic about everything. Mom always said you were uptight, but this is next level." Something inside me snapped. The fever, the exhaustion, the years of being treated like an inconvenience, all of it coalesced into a white-hot rage that I could no longer contain. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my apartment, Brandon, right now." He laughed that dismissive laugh that said he did not take me seriously. "Come on, Eleanor, do not be like that. We are family." Family does not steal from each other. Family does not treat trust funds like ATM machines. And family does not spend years making excuses while one person holds everything together. "Whoa, where is this coming from?" Brandon stood up, his expression shifting to something like concern, but it was the kind of concern that was really annoyance. "Are you still feverish? Maybe you should go back to bed. I am perfectly clear-headed, and I am done. Done. Covering for you, done making excuses, done pretending that your behavior is acceptable because Mom says you are sensitive." His face darkened. "You know what your problem is, Eleanor. You are jealous? You have always been jealous that Mom loves me more. You are bitter because you are boring and I am fun. And now you have a little bit of power over some money and you are drunk on it." The words should have hurt, but instead they clarified everything. I saw Brandon clearly for the first time, not as my little brother who needed guidance, but as a 21-year-old man who had been enabled into narcissistic entitlement by a mother who refused to let him experience consequences. "Get out," I repeated, walking to the door and opening it. "And give me the debit card." "I do not have it with me." "Then you better find it and return it by tomorrow, or I am reporting it stolen to the bank and to the police." His jaw dropped. "You would not." "Try me." He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame, and I stood there in my small apartment, shaking with adrenaline and something that felt oddly like relief. The next morning, I started building my case. I gathered every document related to the trust, highlighting the forfeiture clause in bright red ink. I pulled up every text message, every email, every communication where Mom or Brandon had pressured me about the trust money. I documented every transaction from Brandon's shopping spree, creating a detailed spreadsheet with item descriptions, costs, and timestamps. I contacted the stores where the purchases were made, requesting receipts. I did what I do best as a historian. I built an irrefutable narrative of evidence. Harrison Thorne reviewed everything I sent him, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice when he called me back. "This is ironclad, Eleanor. Brandon has violated the terms clearly and repeatedly. The forfeiture clause applies without question." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we schedule a meeting with all parties present. Victoria will need to be notified. She will bring her own lawyer, undoubtedly. But the outcome is not in question. Brandon has forfeited his inheritance." The call came that evening exactly as I expected it would. Mom's number flashed on my screen, and I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Eleanor, honey!" Her voice was syrup sweet. Clearly, Mom had been briefed on the situation and was attempting damage control. "I heard there was some confusion about the trust account. Brandon feels terrible about the misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding, Mom. It was theft." Her tone shifted, hardening. "Do not be dramatic. He is your brother. He made a mistake. Young people make mistakes. He is 21 years old, not a child, and this was not a mistake. It was a deliberate choice to violate the trust terms." "Eleanor, think about what you are doing. Do you really want to destroy your brother's future over some money?" "I am not destroying anything. Brandon destroyed his own future the moment he decided that Grandma's rules did not apply to him." She was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, the warmth was completely gone. "You have always been jealous of him. Always. You could not stand that he was special, that people loved him naturally, while you had to work so hard just to be noticed." The words landed sharp and cruel, and I felt that old familiar ache, the one that said maybe she was right, maybe I was just bitter and petty and unlovable. But then I thought about Grandma Evelyn, about the way she had looked at me in her office all those years ago, about how she had trusted me to do what was right, even when it was hard. "I am not jealous, Mom. I am tired. Tired of being treated like an ATM. Tired of watching you enable Brandon into uselessness. And tired of pretending that your favoritism did not hurt me every single day of my life." She hung up on me. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Harrison Thorne's office, a sleek suite in a downtown building that smelled like leather and old money. I arrived early, my briefcase heavy with documentation, wearing a simple black suit that made me feel armored and professional. Victoria arrived exactly on time, dressed in a power red suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her makeup perfect, her expression pleasant, but with steel underneath. Brandon trailed behind her, looking significantly less confident than he had at my door a few days earlier. Behind them came Douglas, Victoria's lawyer, a man whose reputation for aggressive tactics and flexible ethics was well known in legal circles. The conference room was large and coldly elegant, with a massive table and leather chairs that creaked expensively. Harrison Thorne sat at the head of the table, every inch the distinguished attorney in his charcoal suit and silver tie. I took the seat to his right, placing my briefcase deliberately in front of me. Victoria tried to catch my eye, to give me that look that had always made me doubt myself. That look that said I was overreacting, that I was being unreasonable. I looked right through her. Harrison began the meeting with formal precision. "We are here to discuss a serious matter. On the night of the 15th, $9,194 were withdrawn from the Evelyn Vance Trust Fund account without authorization. These withdrawals constitute fraud under the trust agreement." Douglas jumped in immediately. "That is a very inflammatory term, Mr. Thorne. My clients are prepared to return the funds in question." This was clearly a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. "It was not a misunderstanding," I said, my voice calm and clear. "It was theft, and I have documentation to prove it." I opened my briefcase and began laying out the evidence piece by piece. Brandon's transaction history, each luxury purchase highlighted and annotated. The trust agreement with the forfeiture clause marked. copies of text messages and emails showing that both Brandon and Victoria had been repeatedly informed of the trust rules and chose to ignore them. Victoria leaned forward, her voice taking on that pleading quality that she used when she wanted to manipulate someone. "Eleanor, honey, you are being so harsh. Brandon is going to pay everything back. He made a mistake. Do you really want to punish him forever for one mistake?" "This was not one mistake," I replied, meeting her eyes steadily. "This was a pattern of disrespect for Grandma's wishes and for the trust she placed in me. Brandon has spent 2 years trying to access this money improperly. This shopping spree was just the most blatant example." I pulled up the security footage from one of the stores on my laptop showing Brandon trying on luxury watches, laughing with the sales clerk, carelessly swiping the stolen card over and over. Victoria's face went pale as she watched her golden boy, her special child, casually stealing from his own family. "Brandon, do you have anything to say?" Harrison asked. Brandon looked at his mother, then at Douglas, then finally at me. His face had gone from confident to confused to desperate. "I will pay it back," he said, his voice smaller than I had ever heard it. "I swear, Eleanor, I will get a job. I will pay back every cent." "That is not how this works, Brandon. Grandma Evelyn put the forfeiture clause in the trust for exactly this situation." "What does that mean?" he asked, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Harrison Thorne opened the trust document and began reading in his deep, measured voice. "Any fraudulent, unauthorized, or frivolous withdrawal made by the beneficiary, Brandon Vance, before the age of 30, will immediately and irrevocably result in the complete forfeiture of that person's inheritance rights to the trust principal." The silence in the room was absolute. Brandon's face went white. "What? What does that mean, forfeit?" "It means you lose everything," I said, and I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, bone-weary sadness. The entire $250,000. It all goes to the alternative beneficiaries listed in the trust. In this case, historical preservation societies and educational foundations. Victoria erupted. "No! No, this is not happening. Harrison, tell me this is not real. Tell me there is a way around this." "There is no way around it, Mrs. Vance. The clause is clear and legally binding. Brandon's actions triggered it automatically." "This is your fault!" Victoria spun on me, her voice rising. "You poisoned her against us. You manipulated that old woman into putting that clause in the trust because you have always hated your brother." "I did not even know about the forfeiture clause until after Grandma died," I said quietly. "She put it in there because she understood human nature. She understood that easy money destroys character. She was testing Brandon and he failed." "You bitch," Victoria hissed. "You cruel, jealous, bitter little bitch." Mrs. Vance Douglas put a warning hand on her arm, but she shook him off. Brandon sat frozen, his expensive new clothes suddenly looking like a costume, his face crumpling as he processed what he had done. $250,000, he whispered. "Gone, because I bought some shoes." "Because you stole," I corrected. "Because you thought the rules did not apply to you. Because Mom convinced you that you were special and that the world owed you everything." "Do not you dare blame me." Victoria stood up, pointing a finger at me. "I gave you everything. I raised you, I supported you, and this is how you repay me, by destroying your brother's future." "You did not give me everything, Mom. You gave Brandon everything. You gave him excuses and bailouts and unconditional approval, no matter what he did. What you gave me was criticism and neglect, and the expectation that I would always clean up everyone else's messes." "That is not true." "It is completely true. And you know what the saddest part is? I would have helped Brandon if he had asked properly. If he had come to me with a real plan with genuine need with respect for Grandma's wishes, I would have worked with him. But instead, you both treated me like an obstacle to be manipulated or overcome." Victoria's face was red with rage, and I realized genuine fear. She had always planned on Brandon's inheritance being her safety net too, her backup plan for retirement. Her proof that she had successfully raised a golden child who would take care of her. "There has to be a way to fix this," she said to Douglas. "Sue her. Sue the trust. Sue somebody." Douglas shook his head. "The trust is airtight, Victoria. I reviewed it before we came here. There is no legal recourse." Eleanor, Brandon said, and his voice was pleading now, stripped of all arrogance. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." Is there anything at all I can do? I looked at my little brother, 21 years old, spoiled and thoughtless, and now facing the first real consequence of his life. I could have forgiven him, I suppose. I could have found some legal loophole, some technicality that would let him off the hook. But that would not have honored my grandmother's wishes, and it would not have helped Brandon learn the lesson he desperately needed to learn. No, I said. There is nothing you can do. The decision has been made. The trust will be distributed according to the alternate beneficiary clauses. Victoria grabbed her purse and stood up, her movements sharp and angry. This is not over, she said. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. I will tell everyone how you destroyed your own brother. You can tell them whatever you want, Mom. The truth is in the documents. She left Douglas hurrying after her, trying to convince her to calm down. Brandon sat for a moment longer, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I never thought you would actually do it, he said quietly. I did not do anything, Brandon. You did this to yourself. Grandma gave you $250,000 and one simple rule. Do not be greedy, and you could not even manage that. He stood up slowly, moving like someone who had just been hit by a truck. When he reached the door, he turned back. For what it is worth, you were right. I am not special. I am just lazy and entitled. Mom did me no favors. Then it was just me and Harrison in the quiet conference room. He looked at me over his reading glasses, his expression unreadable. That was the hardest thing I have ever had to watch, he said, and I have been a lawyer for 35 years. Did I do the right thing? You did exactly what your grandmother asked you to do. You were the gatekeeper. You protected her legacy. Then why does it feel so terrible? Because you are a good person, Eleanor. Doing the right thing often feels terrible. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Victoria launched a social media campaign against me, posting long emotional screeds about ungrateful daughters and family betrayal. Her friends, people I had known my entire life, sent me messages ranging from disappointed to outright hostile. How could you do not? You care about family. Your mother is devastated. I did not respond to any of them. I had learned from my grandmother that when you know you are right, you do not need to defend yourself to people who have already decided to misunderstand you. Brandon left town within 2 weeks, moving across the country to stay with a distant cousin who offered him a job in construction. The last I heard, he was working 10-hour days, learning what it meant to earn money with his hands and his back, learning what most people understand instinctively, that nothing worth having comes easy. Victoria's real estate career suffered. Word got around about what had happened, and potential clients wondered about her judgment. If she could not manage her own family's finances, could she be trusted with theirs? She had to sell her luxury condo and move into a modest apartment. The woman who had always prided herself on appearances, on status, on being envied, now had to live like everyone else. She tried to reach out to me months later, sending texts that alternated between guilt trips and blame. You have ruined this family. I hope you are happy. I raised you better than this. I never thought you could be so cruel. I sent one message back. You did not ruin this family, Mom, but you enabled Brandon into helplessness, and you taught him that other people's boundaries do not matter. I hope someday you can see that what I did was not cruelty. It was the last bit of parenting he is going to get. She blocked me after that. As for me, something shifted after that meeting in Harrison's office. I had spent 29 years trying to be good enough, trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely. I had absorbed blame and criticism and neglect, always thinking that if I just tried harder, if I just gave more, if I just asked for less, then maybe I would finally be valued. But my grandmother had known better. She had known that some people will take and take and take until there is nothing left, and that the only way to stop them is to set a boundary and defend it no matter the cost. I threw myself into my work at the university archives. 3 months after the trust distribution, I was offered a promotion to senior archivist, a position that came with a significant raise and oversight of the historical preservation department. My colleagues respected me. My work mattered. I was building something that would outlast me, just like my grandmother had done. The Evelyn Vance Trust, now distributed to its alternative beneficiaries, funded the renovation of the university library's historical wing. They named it the Grace M. Historical Preservation Fund, using my grandmother's full name as she had requested in a codicil to her will. At the dedication ceremony, I stood in front of a bronze plaque bearing her name, and felt her presence so strongly I almost turned around expecting to see her there. Harrison Thorne attended the ceremony. Afterward, as we stood in the renovated library surrounded by preserved documents and restored archives, he said something I will never forget. "Your grandmother did not just protect money with that trust, Eleanor. She protected you. That forfeiture clause was not just about teaching Brandon a lesson. It was about giving you permission to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to stop sacrificing yourself for people who would never appreciate it. That was her final gift to you. Freedom." I thought about that for a long time, about how sometimes the people who love us most understand that we need more than money or comfort. We need the tools to protect ourselves, the permission to disappoint others, the courage to choose ourselves even when it costs us relationships we desperately wanted to keep. I still think about Brandon, sometimes wonder if he learned anything from losing everything. I wonder if Victoria ever looked in the mirror and acknowledged her role in creating the situation. I wonder if either of them understands that I did not take anything from them. I simply enforced consequences that they had been warned about repeatedly. But mostly, I think about my grandmother, about the way she saw me when everyone else overlooked me, about how she trusted me with not just money, but with the harder task of staying true to principles even when people I loved hated me for it. I visit her grave every month, bringing fresh flowers and sitting on the bench nearby. I tell her about my work, about the documents we have preserved, about the students who are learning to value history. I tell her about the boundary I set the family I lost and the self-respect I gained. I think she would be proud. 6 months after the trust distribution, I received a letter forwarded through Harrison's office. It was from Brandon, postmarked from Colorado, written on lined notebook paper. "Eleanor, it said I get it now. I get what you and Grandma were trying to teach me. I thought I was special, that I deserved things just for existing. Working construction 12 hours a day in the heat taught me more in 6 months than 21 years of Mom making excuses for me. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for another chance. I just wanted you to know that losing that money was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to grow up. I still have a long way to go, but I am trying. I hope someday you can see that your tough love worked, even if it hurt like hell. Your brother, Brandon." I cried when I read it, great heaving sobs that came from some deep place I had kept locked away for years. I cried for the relationship we never had, for the mother who chose favoritism over fairness, for the years I spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. But I also cried with relief because Brandon's letter meant that the pain had not been pointless. The boundary I set, the consequence I enforced it, had created space for him to finally grow. I keep the letter in my desk drawer next to a photograph of Grandma Evelyn. In the picture, she is standing in front of her first rental property, young and determined, and ready to build something that would last. I look at that photo whenever I doubt myself, whenever the old programming kicks in and tells me I should have been kinder, softer, more accommodating. Then I remember that kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all. It is enabling. It is sacrificing yourself on the altar of other people's comfort. It is teaching people that your needs do not matter, that your pain is less important than their convenience. My grandmother understood that the hardest thing you can do for someone you love is let them face consequences. She understood that protection sometimes looks like punishment, that true love sometimes requires saying no, that the people who call you cruel for setting boundaries are often the ones who benefited most from your boundarylessness. Today, I live in a small but comfortable apartment filled with books and plants, and the kind of quiet peace that comes from no longer performing for people who will never be satisfied. I have friends who value me, colleagues who respect me, and a career that fulfills me. I spend my evenings reading, researching, occasionally going out with people who do not expect me to fix their problems or fund their lifestyles. I am for the first time in my adult life simply myself. Not the responsible daughter, not the bitter sister, not the family ATM. Just Eleanor, historian archivist woman who learned that choosing herself was not selfish. It was survival. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I wish I had found a way to save Brandon's inheritance while still teaching him a lesson. The answer is no, because compromise in that situation would have been just another form of enabling another way of protecting him from the reality of his actions. My grandmother taught me that wealth is not just money. It is character integrity, the willingness to do hard things for the right reasons. Brandon lost money, but he gained the chance to build character. That trade, painful as it was, may have been the most valuable gift I could have given him. As for Victoria, I have heard through the grapevine that she tells anyone who will listen that she has a cruel, ungrateful daughter who destroyed her family. She has rewritten history in her mind, cast herself as the victim of my ambition and jealousy. I used to let that bother me, used to worry about what people thought, used to lose sleep over the idea that somewhere someone believed her version of events. Now I understand that people who need to villainize you for setting boundaries are simply advertising their own inability to respect those boundaries. Victoria's narrative says far more about her than it ever could about me. The university library hosted a gala last month to celebrate the completion of the renovation funded by the Evelyn Vance Trust. The Historical Preservation Wing was stunning, all restored woodwork and climate-controlled display cases and state-of-the-art archival systems. Students and faculty mingled with donors and community members, everyone admiring the space that would house centuries of carefully preserved history. I stood in front of the bronze dedication plaque reading my grandmother's name for the 100th time when a young woman approached me. She was probably 20, with bright eyes and an armful of textbooks. "Excuse me," she said shyly. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" "I am. I just wanted to thank you. I am a history major, and this new wing, it is incredible. The professor said your grandmother's trust fund made all of this possible. Because of this, we have access to primary sources that most undergraduate programs only dream about." I felt my throat tighten. My grandmother would be very happy to hear that. The girl smiled. "My professor also said that you managed the trust, that you made sure the money went where it could do the most good." "That is really cool. A lot of people would have just kept it in the family." "Some things are bigger than family," I said, and realized I believed it completely. After she walked away, I stood alone in the beautiful space my grandmother's money and my difficult decision had created. This library wing would serve students for generations. It would preserve history, foster learning, inspire curiosity. Brandon would have spent that $250,000 on cars and clothes and cryptocurrency schemes, and it would have disappeared without a trace, leaving nothing behind but debt and disappointment. Instead, Grandma Evelyn's legacy lived on in polished wood and preserved documents and young minds expanding with knowledge. That felt right. That felt like honoring her in the way she deserved. Harrison Thorne found me standing there, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. He offered me one, and we stood together in comfortable silence, watching students explore the new archives. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," he said finally. "In all my years practicing law, I have never seen someone understand human nature so completely. She knew exactly what would happen every step of the way. She set me up," I said, but there was no bitterness in it. She knew Brandon would eventually try to access the money improperly. She knew Mom would enable him. She knew I would have to make an impossible choice. And she trusted me to make the right one, even if it destroyed my family. "She did not set you up," Harrison said gently. "She set you free. There is a difference." We raised our glasses in a quiet toast to a woman who had understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is giving someone the tools and permission to save themselves. That night alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and did something I had been avoiding for months. I wrote an email to Brandon. "I do not know if you will read this," I wrote, "or if you even want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I got your letter and it meant more to me than you probably realize. You asked if the tough love worked. It did. But more importantly, you worked. You did the hard thing. You grew up. I am proud of you for that. I also wanted to tell you something I wish I had said at Harrison's office. I never hated you. I was hurt by the favoritism, frustrated by the enabling, exhausted by the constant demands. But I never hated you. You are my brother, and I wanted you to become the person you were capable of being. Grandma Evelyn was not punishing you with that forfeiture clause. She was protecting you from yourself, and she was protecting me from being your enabler. The trust fund was a test of character, and failing it was the most valuable lesson you could have learned. I hope your job in Colorado is going well. I hope you are building a life based on your own efforts rather than someone else's money. I hope you are discovering who you are when you are not being told you are special just for existing. If you ever want to talk, really talk without Mom's manipulation or the weight of the trust between us, I would like that. but I understand if you are not ready. Some wounds take a long time to heal. Take care of yourself, Brandon. Earn your own way. Build your own life. And maybe someday we can be siblings instead of beneficiary and trustee. Your sister, Eleanor. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then closed the laptop and walked to the window. The city lights stretched out below me, thousands of people living their own complicated lives, making their own difficult choices, learning their own painful lessons. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to be enough for people who would never be satisfied trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it unconditionally. I thought about the old Eleanor, the one who answered every call, who sacrificed her own needs, who believed that if she just tried harder, she would finally be valued. That Eleanor was gone, and I did not mourn her. She had been a survival mechanism, a coping strategy for navigating a family system that was designed to use her. She had served her purpose, and now she could rest. The new Eleanor, the one standing at this window, was harder, wiser, and infinitely more free. She understood that you could love people from a distance, that family did not mean unlimited access, that sometimes the most loving thing you could do was enforce consequences that hurt. 3 weeks later, I received a response from Brandon. It was short but genuine. Eleanor. I read it. Thank you for being proud of me. That means more than you know. I am not ready to talk yet. There is still too much shame, too much I need to work through on my own. But maybe someday. I am learning to be a person worth knowing. It is harder than I thought it would be. Mom called me last week. She wanted me to ask you to reconsider the trust distribution to find some legal loophole. I told her no. I told her that you did the right thing and that I needed to accept the consequences of my actions. She hung up on me. I think that might have been the first time I have ever stood up to her. It felt good, scary but good. Keep being strong, sis. One of us needed to be. Brandon. I printed that email and put it in my desk drawer next to his first letter and the photo of Grandma Evelyn. Evidence that pain could lead to growth, that boundaries could create space for change, that enforcing consequences was sometimes the most loving thing you could do. Work continued to flourish. 6 months after the library dedication, I was asked to lead a major digitization project preserving historical documents and making them accessible to researchers worldwide. It was the kind of project that would define my career, the kind of work that gave my life meaning and purpose beyond family drama and inherited obligation. I hired a team, wrote grants, collaborated with universities across the country. I spent my days immersed in history, in the stories of people who had lived and struggled and triumphed centuries before. I found patterns, drew connections, helped modern people understand their past. It was in every sense exactly the life my grandmother had wanted for me. Not defined by family dysfunction, not limited by other people's expectations, but expansive and meaningful and entirely my own. I dated occasionally, though I was cautious about it. Years of being used had made me wary, careful about who I let close. I looked for green flags now, not red ones. I looked for people who respected boundaries, who had their own lives, who did not see me as a solution to their problems. I found to my surprise that I was okay alone. Better than okay. I was content, fulfilled, at peace with myself in a way I had never been when I was constantly managing other people's chaos. On the second anniversary of the trust distribution, I visited my grandmother's grave with a detailed report of everything the trust money had accomplished. The library wing, the digitization project, the scholarships that had been funded, the historical preservation initiatives that were protecting documents for future generations. I read it all aloud, sitting on the bench near her headstone, imagining her listening with that sharp, satisfied expression she used to get when one of her business deals closed successfully. You were right, Grandma, I said finally. About everything. About Brandon needing consequences. About Mom being unable to see past her favoritism. About me needing permission to choose myself. I wish you were here so I could thank you properly. The wind rustled through the trees, warm and gentle, and for a moment I felt her there, felt her approval, and her love, and her pride. I am the gatekeeper, I said softly. Just like you asked, but I am also free. Thank you for that. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Harrison Thorne. He sent a photo of a new plaque being installed at the library, this one marking the establishment of the Evelyn Vance Scholarship for first-generation college students pursuing degrees in history or archival science. She would love this, his message said. She would, I replied, and so do I. That night, I sat down and wrote in the journal I had started keeping after the trust distribution. It had become my space for processing, for tracking my growth, for documenting the journey from victim to survivor to someone who thrived. Today, I realized something I wrote. I spent 29 years trying to earn love from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it freely. I sacrificed my peace, my boundaries, my self-respect, all in pursuit of approval that would never come. The trust distribution did not destroy my family. It revealed what my family actually was. A system built on enabling and exploitation held together by one person's endless capacity to absorb dysfunction. When I stopped absorbing, when I enforced boundaries, when I chose my grandmother's wisdom over my mother's manipulation, the system collapsed. And that collapse was not my failure. It was my liberation. I am not the villain in this story, no matter what Mom tells people. I am not cruel for enforcing consequences. I am not bitter for refusing to be used. I am not ungrateful for choosing myself. I am simply a woman who learned later than I should have, but not too late, that family is not an excuse for abuse, that love without respect is manipulation, and that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is disappointing people who never valued you anyway. Grandma Evelyn gave me money, yes, but more importantly, she gave me a framework for understanding my worth, a reason to stand firm, and proof that someone saw me clearly and loved me anyway. That is the real inheritance, not the trust fund, but the self-respect to enforce it. I closed the journal and looked around my small apartment at the life I had built on my own terms. It was not dramatic or flashy or enviable by conventional standards, but it was mine earned through my own effort, built on my own values, free from the weight of other people's dysfunction. The phone on my desk lit up with an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Eleanor Vance, a young woman's voice asked. Yes, my name is Sophia. I am one of the recipients of the Evelyn Vance Scholarship. I am a first-generation college student studying archival science. I just wanted to call and say thank you. This scholarship changed my life. Without it, I would not be here. My eyes filled with tears. Tell me about yourself, Sophia. She did, pouring out her story of being the first in her family to attend college, of working 2 jobs while taking classes, of discovering a passion for preserving history. She talked about her dreams of working in major archives, of helping communities preserve their stories, of making history accessible to everyone. This is exactly what my grandmother wanted, I said when she finished. She believed in education and investing in people who would use opportunities wisely. I am so glad you are one of those people. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment and felt the weight of my decision 2 years ago settle into something like peace. Yes, I had lost my family. Yes, it had been painful beyond description. Yes, there were moments when I still doubted myself, still wondered if I had been too harsh, too rigid, too unforgiving. But then I thought about Sophia, about the library wing, about Brandon learning to work with his hands, about the countless students who would benefit from my grandmother's legacy properly used. I thought about the version of myself who would have caved to Victoria's pressure, who would have let Brandon off the hook, who would have chosen temporary peace over long-term integrity. That version of Eleanor would still be trapped, still be used, still be waiting for love from people who saw her as a resource rather than a person. This version of Eleanor was free. So here is what I learned, what I want anyone who hears my story to understand. Setting boundaries will cost you relationships, but only with people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Choosing yourself will make some people angry, but only people who preferred you self-sacrificing and small. Enforcing consequences will be called cruel, but only by those who expected to face none. Your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice for others. Your value is not measured by your willingness to absorb dysfunction. Your love is not proven by your tolerance for disrespect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes the healthiest choice is walking away. Sometimes protecting yourself is the first step toward building the life you actually deserve. My grandmother understood that, and she gave me the tools to understand it too. The Evelyn Vance Trust was not just money. It was a lesson in character and integrity, and the courage required to stand firm when everyone around you demands that you bend. I stood firm. My family collapsed. And from those ruins, I built something better. A life based on my own values, a career that fulfills me. Relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation, and most importantly, a sense of self that no longer requires external validation. That is the real price of greed. Not the money Brandon lost, but the relationships that could not survive honesty, the family system that required exploitation to function, the false peace that depended on one person endlessly sacrificing. I paid that price willingly, and I would pay it again. Because on the other side of that payment is freedom, and freedom is worth everything. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for yourself cost you relationships? Have you ever had to choose between your boundaries and someone else's comfort? How did you handle it, and would you make the same choice again? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you courage or clarity or just made you feel less alone, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself even when it is hard. Until next time, remember that you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.